Hi everyone and welcome along to the Woodland Wreath Kit tutorial. Thank you so much for placing your orders. We've sold so many wreath kits this year. We've had so much love and so many lovely messages. You're also excited to make them. So I really hope you enjoy this next sort of 45 minutes to an hour where I will take you through step by step how to create a beautiful wreath kit. I promise it's so easy when you know how. So grab yourself a glass of wine or a cup of tea, put some music on, find some space, grab yourself some strong scissors or secateurs, and we'll begin. Okay, so in your wreath kit, you will have lots and lots of different ingredients. So you will have all of your foliages, your florals, your twine, your ribbon, your little trinkly bits that go on the top. So I'll take you through each of those in stages. So we have our pistache, our ivy berries, our moss, our viburnum berries, our hypericum berries, our pine cones and poppy heads, eucalyptus populus, we've got our waxflower, seed pods, cedar and spruce, and then you will have your binding wire, your twine and your navy ribbon and a wire to attach your ribbon with. So what I'm going to do is just to create a bit of space so you can see, I'm going to take away certain elements that are going to go on at the end. So once we've got our beautiful wreath base. So those things that you can put to the side are the blue viburnum berries. So they can go to the side. You can put to the side your white hypericum berries. You can put to the side all of your pine cones that will be ready wired and your poppy seed heads. So they can go all at the side, so we don't need those yet. You can put away your ribbon and your wire, so you don't lose that. So that's going at the side. You can put away your twine. I think everything else we're going to start breaking down. So put my scissors behind because I've got those to cut the ribbon with at the end, and I've got my secateurs. Okay, so to begin with, you're going to take your wire wreath base and your binding wire, and what you need to do is attach your binding wire to the outer ring of your wreath ring, and then you're basically just going to create a zigzag pattern over and under the wreath ring. Now it's worth noting here that this binding wire stays on your wreath right until the end, so don't do the stages and then cut it off. So just keep it attached to your wreath base throughout the entire process until I instruct you to sort of cast off, basically, so to cut it off. So you're keeping your binding wire on the whole time. Okay, so that has created a sort of zigzag pattern, and the purpose of that zigzag pattern is to create a sort of structure to hold the moss. So the moss is called sphagnum moss. It is not pretty. Its purpose is to create a sort of, or provide a sort of water source for your fresh ingredients. So it keeps your wreath fresher for longer. You're not going to be able to see it at all once we've got all of these lovely bits on top. But what we're going to do is we're going to attach it to our wreath ring by following that same pattern. So going over and under. And if you want to, you can moisten your moss a little bit more before starting, if you want to, or you can do that at the end once the wreath is made. So over the top and then under. And don't sort of scrimp on the moss, make sure you include all of it, because by creating a really sort of lush, dense mossed ring, you create a really luxurious full wreath at the end. So we're just going up and over in clumps. And again, you're not going to see it, so it doesn't matter if it doesn't look pretty. Now, to keep your wreath looking fresh for as long as possible, this is the item sort of in your wreath kit that you will keep damp. So you basically water it from behind. We'll go through that all at the end, but you sort of trickle water behind your wreath, keeping that moss nice and damp. Okay, last little bit. So as you can see, there's lots and lots of moss on here. It's nice and full, really dense. Okay, I'm just going to get rid of that moss now and then clear my bench so that you can see the next process. Okay, we're now going to cut down all of the elements in our wreath kit, apart from the ones that you've put behind. So it's mainly the sort of denser foliages. So we're going to start with our ivy, and you can start with whatever you like, but I'm going to start with the ivy because it's closest to me. Let's move this to the side. And we're basically going to cut down into little sections, removing any leaves that don't look particularly pleasing. And you're sort of aiming for about 5 or 6 inches. It's definitely worth noting here that, you know, it's better to cut longer and then recut than to cut short at first, and then you're left with, you know, sort of short stems that create a more kind of compact, smaller wreath. Whereas if you keep them sort of longer, you're going to create a more sort of wild, rustic wreath. If you've got any yellowing leaves, that's fine. That's completely normal, especially for ivy. You can just take those off. Okay, nearly there with our ivy. Okay, so that is the first sort of element of our wreath cutting down process. So that's the ivy berries done. So I'm just going to move those to the side, and then I'm going to bring in my pistache. Now, I would definitely say that in the wreath kits, there are elements that are, you know, the showstoppers, the favourites, the more beautiful, aesthetically pleasing elements. The pistache is a great foliage. It's really sort of dense and creates a lot of body in a wreath, but it's not necessarily the most exciting. So the reason we use it is to, like I say, create that body and that depth, but it probably stays at the back of the wreath. That will all become clear in a moment, but I'll use it to create depth rather than all the showstoppers end up on the front. So we're just going to cut this down the same way as we've done our ivy. So sort of into sections of about 5 inches, 5-6 inches. And try and use as much of it as possible, even if it's sort of bits that have got a sort of cut stalk, you can still use that. It's going to go at the back, like I said, so you're not necessarily going to see much of it. Out of all the foliages, this is the one that needs the sort of the moss to be as damp as possible. So again, that's another reason why we put it at the back, is because it probably does dry out the quickest. But that's fine, that's normal. Everything will dry out eventually. But yeah, by putting it at the back, you still get that volume and the depth, but when it dries out, you don't really notice. Nearly there. This is sort of the longer process and probably not the most exciting part of wreath making, but it's all important, and then shortly we'll be able to start creating our posies that go on the wreath. So that now goes to the side. And now I'm going to move on to the poplar. So this is the eucalyptus. So it's a lovely sort of silvery grey foliage with these really lovely kind of eucalyptus berries. So again, we're going to cut that down in a similar way. We're just looking at sort of 5-6 inches. It's 5 to 6 inch pieces. And this is more of a sort of showstopper foliage that will feature more on the front of your wreath. So that is our eucalyptus populus. So I'm going to pop that to the side now too. And now I'm going to go with the cedar. So this is one of my favourites. It's a really, just screams Christmas to me. Much like the spruce, which we'll do next, but it just feels so Christmassy. It's got that spiky texture. So yeah, we just cut this down, probably into slightly longer pieces. You're looking at sort of 7 inches maybe on the cedar. And the cedar is just sort of touches that will go again at the front of your wreath. Okay, so that's your cedar. We're going to cut down the white wax flower. So this is a lovely sort of floral that does tend to dry out really nicely. It also smells like lemongrass when it's cut. So do sort of, when you cut it down, have a smell of the stems and you'll see what I mean. So we're just taking little pieces, again, sort of 5-6 inches. Okay, so that's the wax flower. Pop that at the pile at the front. And then these are the scabiosa pods. You can add these in at the end if you want to. The only thing is that their stems are quite sort of, they can snap up quite easily. So I'm just going to cut them down to sort of 7 inches, and I'm going to add them in the posies rather than at the end. So that's your scabiosa pod. And then we're going to do the spruce. Now this smells incredible. It just smells like Christmas. Yeah, one of my favorites. So with this, we're just cutting down into sections. So we'll start here with the top section, like so, and then you basically have a central stem that goes all the way along. And we're just going to cut sections off that central stem. If you have a larger bit, usually down the bottom, you can break that up into a few different pieces. We're just trying to get as much out of our foliages as we can. So for example, this one here, I'm going to take that one in the middle, and then I'm going to take this further down. So there you see, we've got the trunk left, and we've basically used all of the foliage that was on it. So that can go to the side. Move this over and start with the next. So just cutting it down and popping it in your pile. Okay, so that's all of our foliage broken down, and we're then going to add the posies of the different foliage in front of us, so then we can start building our wreath. Okay. So keeping your binding wire attached, you're going to take your mossed wreath ring, and what we're going to do is we're going to create posies of the foliages and place them on our wreath in a very specific technique that will basically result in the most beautiful and most professional looking Christmas wreath. It's a really easy sort of process to follow, and it's the most important part to create something that you'll be amazed that you've made and that you'll be really proud of. So what we're going to do is create little posies. So we're going to take a few sprigs from each pile to create a posy of foliage. So I've taken 3 sections of pistache. I've taken some ivy, some populus. I'm going to put some of my spruce at the back and another piece at the front, and then I'm going to add in some of my cedar to the front too. Do I need anything else? Might put another bit of ivy at the front. So you're looking sort of for a posy that's kind of this sort of style and shape, that sort of size. And then we're going to take our wreath ring and we're going to have our binding wire in the middle, and we're going to imagine that our wreath ring is a clock. So you've got 12, 3, 6 and 9, and we always start at the 9 o'clock place on your wreath ring. So if you imagine you're going to add your posy to the 9 o'clock section of your wreath ring, and you're going to slightly angle it out, just slightly. So I'm laying my posy down, slightly angling it out. I'm changing my grip so that I have my hand over the posy nice and tight, and I'm picking up my wreath ring as well at the same time. And then taking my binding wire and really tightly, you can be as tight as you want and assertive as you want because nothing's going to break. I'm going over 2 to 3 times, pulling as I go. And I'm going to lay that back down flat, and then a really crucial step here, I'm then going to twist. So I've now got my new 9 o'clock, which is basically where the 3 sort of wraps of binding wire is, and that's where my new posy is going to go. It will all become clearer as you go along. Okay, let's make another posy. So I'm going to take a couple of pieces of pistache. I'm going to take some spruce. I'm going to put that on the front and the back. I'm going to take 1 piece of cedar. Take 1 piece of eucalyptus populus. I'm going to take some white wax flower in this one. And then I'm going to finish maybe with another piece of ivy. So I've made my posy. I'm now going to lay it at 9 o'clock on my wreath ring on top of the binding wire of the previous posy, facing slightly out. So I'm just going to aim it for here, and you'll see almost as you do it sort of slots in. Yeah, so you're kind of going over the top at 9 o'clock, slightly pointing out. And then I'm going to change my grip, holding my wreath ring and my posy together really tight, and then I'm going to bind that 3 times, pulling each time so it's nice and tight. I'm going to lay it back down, and then I'm going to twist. So I have a new 9 o'clock where the previous posy's binding wires are, and that's where my new posy that I'm going to make now is going to go. Okay, so let's make another posy. So I'm going to take a couple of pieces, or 3 pieces of pistache. I'm going to take 2 or 3 pieces of the spruce. I'm going to take 2 pieces of the ivy berries. I'm going to take a scabiosa pod and lay that on top. And then I'm going to put some lovely eucalyptus populus on top. Yeah, that's what I'm going to put on that one. So I'm taking my posy and I'm placing it at 9 o'clock over my wreath, previous posy, changing my grip, holding that nice and tight, and going over 3 times. Now you'll see that the wreath at the moment is looking very green. Do not fear, all the snazzy bits go on at the end. Okay, let's do again, another posy. So I'm going with 3 pieces of pistache. I'm going to go with a piece of spruce at the front and at the back. I'm going to put a piece of cedar in there, some eucalyptus populus, some ivy, and then I'm going to pop some more wax flower on top. So the wax flower won't be used in each posy. You want it to be sort of dotted amongst your wreath because there are going to be other white elements going on at the end that we've got to the side. So you sort of almost want to alternate your posies. So I've got white wax flower, then I've got the scabiosa pod, I've got white wax flower, and then the next one I'll put another scabiosopod in. Okay, so we're going at 9 o'clock on our wreath ring, slightly out to the side, slotting that in, changing the grip, holding the wreath and the posy really tight and pulling as I bind round 3 times, and then laying it back down, and I'm going to twist. So I've got my new 9 o'clock, and you'll be able to see now hopefully that it's starting to take shape. You can see that the posies are all flowing in the same direction, and that's how you create a really professional, beautiful looking wreath, is that all the posies are facing the same way. Okay, next posy. So I've got my pistache, my ivy, I'm going to put some spruce at the back, and then I'm going to put a piece at the front. I'm going to add in some cedar too. I'm going to put another ivy berry on the top, and then a little piece of populus. And then because I used the white wax flower last time, I'm now going to add in a scabiosopod. I'm just going to lay that on top of my posy. And then I'm going to go in again at 9 o'clock, slightly facing out. So I'm going to slot it in, change my grip, and bind 3 times. Okay, and then I'm going to twist. Okay, so next posy. So adding in my pistache. And my spruce, which smells just amazing. And then I'm going to pop some cedar. I'm going to put some populus in there and some ivy, put some at the back, and then a prettier piece at the front. And then I'm going to pop some white wax flower in over the top. And then I've got my 9 o'clock section on my wreath. So I'm going in, straight away, over the top, changing my grip and binding nice and tight. Laying it back down and then twisting. So I've got my new 9 o'clock ready for my next posy. Okay, I'll take some pistache. And I'd say by now you can probably tell I'm about halfway. So now if you look at all your foliages, and if you feel, oh, I've probably not used enough, or maybe I need to sort of hang back a little bit, if you've cut it down maybe in a way where there's not, you know, as many stems, that's fine, don't worry. Just sort of hang back a little bit. Or if you feel like, oh my gosh, I've got loads of spruce left over, just add in a little bit more. Or, you know, you can enjoy the foliages if you do have some left over. You can pop them in a bud vase tablescape, or, you know, whatever you fancy, or on a mantle in your home for Christmas. I mean, obviously if it's indoors, it won't last as long. But yeah, try and use as much of the foliage as you can in your wreath. So then you really are creating a sort of full, luxurious looking wreath, which is what, you know, we're all about really. We want it to look really full and special. Okay, I'm adding in a pod here because I've used white wax flower in my previous posy. What am I missing? I'm missing eucalyptus. There we go. Add that in on top. I'm going to take my posy and pop it on top of my 9 o'clock binding wire, change my grip, holding my wreath ring and my posy really tight. I'm going to bind 2 or 3 times, lay it back down and twist. And as you'll be able to see, it's really taking shape. It's really thick and dense and luxurious, you know, it's not sort of spindly, it's looking really lush and abundant. So we're going to carry on our posies. I think now at this point I've probably got 1, 2, 4 posies left. So now I kind of know, you know, what I'm working with in terms of what's left over. Now I'm definitely not suggesting that if you've used hardly any foliage in your first sort of half of a wreath, you then go mad, because obviously then the balance will be off. But, you know, if you want to add in 2 pieces of white wax flower into this bit, if you've got, say, 6 pieces left, knowing that you've got 4 posies left to fill in the gap, then by all means do that. Okay, so I'm going to add in some populus, and then I'm going to put 1 more piece of spruce behind here, and then I'm going to lay this on top of my previous posies binding wire, change my grip, and then bind 3 times. Now you will have a full spool of wire in your kits. I've used sort of like probably one that's got a third left over, so I might need to change that in a minute. But be rest assured, yours will last the whole thing. Oh, I might be okay, we'll see. Okay, so adding in your new posy, so adding in my pistache, my ivy, which has got these lovely kind of poddy berry things. They're just such a lovely looking foliage at this time of the year. I'm going to pop some of my populus berries on. I'm going to put a lovely piece of cedar. The tone is just stunning. And then I'm going to pop my scabiosa pod on top. Take off these leaves that are looking a bit worse for wear. I'll pop in another bit instead. Okay, and then this goes 9 o'clock on top of the previous posies binding wire, and you're going to wrap this 3 times. Lay it back down and twist. Get this big leaf off. There we go. Okay, so we're at 9 o'clock again. So yeah, I think I've got 2 left to make. So adding in our pistache. And our ivy. And then the spruce. And the cedar. Some eucalyptus. And then I'm going to pop some white wax flower in. And again, I've probably got quite a lot left over, so I'm just going to add in 2 pieces there. Excuse me. And then lay that down. What I might do though first, excuse me, is trim my stems. So I'm just going to take sort of an inch off my stems. It just makes this last sort of section a bit easier to manage. So I'm just taking an inch off. So you've then got a bit of a smaller stem of your posy. I'm then going to lay that on my 9 o'clock binding wire from my previous posy and wrap with the binding wire. Really nice and tight. Lay it down and twist. Okay, so I've probably got space for 1, maybe 1.5 posies. So we've got our pistache, ivy, our spruce, which I'm going to put front and back, then cedar on top, I'm going to have my wax flower in and my scoliosa on this one. And then I'm going to finish with a nice piece of ivy with lots of berries on top. And I'm going to trim again. So I'm just going to take off about sort of 1 to 2 inches. And then my 9 o'clock binding wires, I'm just going to tuck it over the top and sort of tuck it underneath the first posy. So now I'm realizing I don't need another posy. I only need this one. I don't need 1.5, I just need 1. So I'm going to take it back out and show you again. So you've got your 9 o'clock binding wire and you've got your first posy here. So basically what you're doing is you're going over the top of your previous posy whilst also tucking the stems in underneath the first posy. So I'll take you through it slowly. So you're going over your previous posy and tucking in underneath your first posy that you put on your wreath. You're taking your hand to change your grip behind your first posy that you did. So you've got it nice and tight so you can lift them both up at the same time. Take your binding wire and follow your hand. So being careful not to sort of catch your skin of your hand, but you're following where your grip is for the binding wire. And you're going to wrap that really tight. So I'm pulling really hard. So underneath the first posy you did and over the top of the stems of your last posy, and I'm pulling that really tight. I'm going to go one more time. And that's it. So that completes the sort of base of your wreath kit. So now we're going to cast off. So it's basically a bit like sewing. So you're just going to take your binding wire and wrap it. We're going to cut it, first. So take, like a 5-inch piece and just cut it. And because you've wrapped your posies really tightly, it's not going to all fall off. It will be absolutely fine. So I've just taken a little 5-inch piece there. And then I'm going to, basically, I'll turn it around so you can see from above. I'm going to wrap it around some of the copper wreath ring. So basically you're sort of casting off like you would be in sewing. So I'm just going to go up, pull that through nice and tight. And again, just going to go one more time, pull it through. I'm then going to cut, so you've got about 1 inch left over. And then going to bend it back on itself and simply tuck it into the moss. So then you're not going to get anything scratching your door. It's nice and sort of smooth. And then we're going to turn it back around. Okay, so there we have our sort of base layer of our wreath. You can have a little jiggle if you want to. If you've got big leaves in the center, you can cut those off. So for example, if you've got one like that, you can just pinch that off. And now we're going to add in our snazzy bits. So I'm just going to move all this leftover foliage to the side. Now if you wanted to, you could put that in bud vases, or if you want to, you can add it into your wreath sort of on an ad hoc basis, as we're about to do with all of the other bits. So you can take the stem, and I'll show you one now. So you take the stem, take off any sort of lower leaves here, and then following your motion, so making sure you're following where all the foliage is pointing, you can then simply push your stem through into the moss. Now some people make wreaths using that method for all of it, especially if they're using, in years gone by when we'd use sort of oasis like floral foam. That is how you'd make the entire wreath, but now it's so much sort of better for the environment because we're using moss as the water source. But that you can just add in little bits if you want. I'll show you again with some of this gorgeous cedar. So again, I'm going to go for my 9 o'clock. So I'm going to put it in there actually. I want to have it here. So I'm just going to go behind because I want it near the back. And I'm just going to gently, though to be fair, you probably don't really need to be gentle, I'm just going to push it through so it goes into the moss. And then that's there facing that way that all of your other elements are facing. Right, now let's add the twine first. So in your kit, you'll have your twine. Now, we give you a nice long piece of twine because we want you to double up. So you fold your twine in half. And basically what you've then got is sort of a much stronger sort of way to hold your wreath on the door. It doesn't really matter where your top and bottom is. I'm trying to work out where I probably will want my ribbon. I feel like I'm going to want my ribbon up here, which actually is where my first posy was. So I'm just going to turn that around. And what you need to do is find sort of the gap between the first posy and the next posy. And then you're going to slide your twine through there. So you've got one going over the top, one going underneath, and then you're simply going to pull it into a knot. And then you can decide, depending on your sort of structure of your door, whether you then want to create another knot, which is what I will do. So I've got like a brass knocker on my door, so that will go over that. So I'll put a knot like that, and then you've got your double sides of twine, and then I'll trim that so it's nice and neat. Okay, so where the twine is, that's the top of your wreath. So the top of your wreath is probably, if you want it to look like the image on the website, is where you'll put your bow. So now, with that in mind, with the idea that the bow will sit here at the top of the wreath, you kind of want to fill the rest of the wreath with your, little trinkly bits. So let's start adding our little bits and bobs in. So I'm going to move my pine cones and poppy to the side because I'm going to put those in last. And I'm going to go in first with my white Hypericum berries. So I'm just going to cut that down to about sort of 4 inches. I'm going to leave the leaves on because they add another texture. And you've got 3 of these. So if you imagine you're working in sort of a triangle formation. So my bow is going to go here. So I'm probably going to look at doing one there, and one there. So you're making that triangle. So I'm going to add this Hypericum in at a slight angle. If you imagine you've got your 9 o'clock place on your wreath. So it's flowing with the rest of the foliage. It's not sort of stuck upright. It's at a slight angle, so there's that lovely flow to your wreath. And basically what you're doing is you're finding with the stem the moss. And if it doesn't go in perfectly like this is just done first time, let's start again. So now that's gone in perfectly and it's just sitting there. The stem is in the moss, so that's where it's going to get its water source from. And I would say, as we've spoken about with the pistache being the foliage that needs the most water, your Hypericum is probably the berry that needs the most water. So if you're finding that the berries are going slightly brown, then it's not getting enough. So you need to give your wreath a really good soak. So one there, I'm going to put one over here. So I'm going to move that round to my 9 o'clock position. I'm going to add that in there. Finding that sort of, there we go, easy bit where it goes in. So obviously if you're hitting metal, you just need to come out again and push it back in. And then I'm going to twist round because the next one is going to go here because that creates my lovely triangle. So that's going in at an angle into the moss. See, that one went in really easily. And then that's where it's getting its nice water source from. Okay, so that's the white Hypericum. And now for probably my favorite, which is these blue viburnum berries. Now, you might agree that the leaves on these aren't particularly pretty, so you can remove them. So I'm just going to take sort of, again, 4 or 5 inch pieces, and I'm just sort of cutting down the berries because it's the berries that we really want. So for example, this one, there's sort of clusters of berries. So I'll take that, but then I'm going to take off the leaves because some of the leaves are looking not pretty, but it's not the leaves we want anyway, it's the berries. So take off any leaves that you don't like. And again, just cutting it into sections. Okay, so much like the Hypericum berries, I'm going to start adding in my blue. And again, so if that's the top of my wreath there, so I'm not going to put any there because that lovely velvet navy bow is going to be there. So I'm just going to scatter it about the wreath in other areas. So let's go for our 9 o'clock. So you're just sort of pushing it into your moss. Quite satisfying. In a sort of non-uniform way. So it doesn't matter if you've got, say for here, I've got a bigger chunk of berries here, and then maybe a bit further around it will be more sporadic, that's fine. So but you can be nice and strong pushing your berries into your moss. Everything is very robust. And if you meet metal, which is what I'm doing now, you just have to find a different, there we go, a different area. So again, this is where my bow is, because that's where my twine is. So I'm not going to add anything more there. So I'm going to go for some more up here. Nestled in. And just making sure everything is facing your sort of flow of your wreath. Okay, so that's those gorgeous blueberries in. Now I'm going to pop in my pine cones. So these will be ready wired for you. So again, I'm making sure, so if my top of my wreath's there, probably going to go in my triangle around, sort of avoiding where the bow is. So I'm going to put one here. You simply just need to push the wire in. If you can feel the wire come out the back on the other side, that's fine. Just make sure you sort of bend it back so that it's not sharp on your door. So I'm going to go one there, and then going to put one up here. And one around here. So then I've got my nice triangle shape. And as you can see, my cones are sort of facing that sort of angle of the rest of my wreath. Now I'm going to add in my other little cones. So again, these are pre-wired. So I'm going to pop those in their own little triangle formation. Or if you want to, you can cluster. That looks lovely too. Okay. And now my poppy seed heads. I'm going to cut these down a little bit. Sort of a 5-inch cut. So if I imagine my bow is here, I'm going to go one here. So again, just at an angle. One in here. And then one down here. You might also find that with your ribbon that the, cut that again. The tails sort of fall. So you might find that you want to move things around afterwards because you might think, oh, the tails of the ribbon are hiding what's behind it. Okay. And then you can sort of zhuzh everything around so that you can see all your lovely showstoppers. You can see your seed pods. You can see your poppies and your cones. Okay, and we're now going to make the bow. So I'm just going to move my wreath to the side, and I'm going to show you how to tie your ribbon. So you're going to take your beautiful navy velvet and your wire, which you'll put to the side so you don't lose it. Take your ribbon as so, and then you're going to sort of put it in half, but then you're going to actually make one of the sides longer. Okay, so now we've got one of the sides probably about 6 inches longer. You're going to create your first sort of side of your bow. I'm going to pinch it nice and tight. Then you're going to take that longer side, and that's going to be the one that goes over the top. And then you're sort of going to tuck it in on itself, or sort of flip it over behind at the back. So that then as you push your bow, other side of the bow through, it's also that lovely velvet. So then when you're ready, you've got it like this, you're then going to pull. And then you can start to make the sides, the bows, slightly shorter. So I'm going to pull this side, and then I'm going to pull this side. So then you're left with a really lovely bow. I do like to have my bow tail slightly uneven. So I'll get my scissors now, and I'll cut one on a diagonal, and then I will cut the other slightly longer, probably only 1 inch. I just think it adds, I don't know, a bit of movement to the wreath. So again, cutting at an angle. So then I've got my gorgeous navy bow. Now to add the wire, and the wire is what you attach it to your wreath with, you're going to flip your lovely bow over, and then you're going to thread your wire through your sort of back of your ribbon. You're going to pull it up like so, and then you're simply going to twist. Now this twist doesn't need to be pretty, it's just to make sure that wire is nice and sturdy. So you're going to end up with something that looks like that. And then you're going to take your wreath and work out where your top is based on where you put your twine. And then you're simply going, you can have a bit of a zhuzh of your ribbon if you want to before it goes on. Simply going to push your wire in where you feel your twine is. I'm trying to find where mine is, there it is. Okay, so it's literally just going to go in through the moss, out the other side, and then you're going to pull that wire that's come out the other side in slightly, bend it back on itself, and push that into the moss. Just again, so that there's no sort of wires sticking out. And then that's when you can start having a nice sort of little play around, making that ribbon how you want it, whether you want the tails to be shorter or whether you want the tails to be longer, or if you want the bow to be bigger. It's completely up to you. And there you have it, all complete, full of texture. You can also then start thinking about if you want to move certain elements that are hidden by the ribbon, but that's completely your call. So there you have it, your Woodland Christmas wreath kit. I would love to see pictures of your wreath. I'd love if you have any questions, feel free to DM me on Instagram. But yeah, I'd love to see them on your door. Please do tag me if you have any photos. And yeah, I really hope you've enjoyed your Woodland Christmas wreath kit.